While my son was cooking, I heard the sound of his cell phone. It was a message from my daughter-in-law. Hurry up. The old man's account is asking for the code. I picked up the phone and replied calmly, Wait a moment. I am coming over. Those words were not mine. They were from my son Richard, but I had read them first. The phone had been left on the dining room table right in front of me while he was chopping onions in the kitchen. The screen lit up, and there it was. The contempt turned into simple words. The old man's account, that is what they called me. No Mr. Arthur, no dad, no father-in-law, the old man. As if I were a deteriorated piece of furniture that still took up space in the house. I felt something cold run down my back. It was not a surprise. It was the confirmation of what I had been suspecting for months. My own children saw me as an ATM with legs, a 72-year-old man whose only use was signing checks and transfers. I got up slowly from the chair with that slowness that age and arthritis give, but also with the mental clarity that has accompanied me all my life. That clarity that made me build a real estate empire in Chicago when many bet on failure. I walked toward the kitchen. Richard continued cutting vegetables, concentrated, unaware that I had just read the message from Emily, his wife. My daughter-in-law, the woman who entered this family with smiles and sweet words, and who was now coordinating with my son the silent looting of my bank accounts. Everything good, Dad? He asked without turning to see me, while the oil began to sizzle in the pan. Everything is perfect, son, I replied with a voice that even surprised me by how serene it sounded. I'm going out for a moment. I need to run some errands at the bank. That was my first lie, or rather my first move. Richard barely nodded. He did not care where I was going. He only cared that when I returned, I would have authorized the transfer that Emily needed. Because yes, that is how this worked. They invented an emergency. I authorized the money. And life went on. Over and over again. Like a sick cycle that I had allowed out of stupidity, out of fatigue, or perhaps out of that pathetic fear that old people feel about being left alone. But that morning something broke inside me. It was not rage. It was something colder, more calculated. I realized that I could no longer continue being the generous idiot who signs papers without reading, the kind patriarch who distributes his fortune among ungrateful children who anxiously wait for my death to divide what remains. I left the house with the keys to the Mercedes, a car I bought 3 years ago and that now Richard uses as if it were his. I got in, adjusted the rearview mirror, and drove toward the downtown Chicago. I was not going to the bank. I was going to the office of Ernest Miller, my lawyer of a lifetime, a man in his 60s with that legal cunning that only comes from the experience of having seen everything. Ernest received me with his usual firm handshake and a smile that vanished as soon as he saw my expression. Arthur, you look as if you have seen a ghost, he said while pointing me to a chair in front of his desk. Worse, I replied. I saw the truth. I told him everything. The constant transfers, the loans they never paid back, the phantom investments that Richard asked me to finance, Emily's luxuries, the latest model Audi, the vacations in Europe, the jewelry that shone at every family dinner, all paid for with my money while they treated me like a necessary nuisance. And your other son? Asked Ernest, taking notes in a leather notebook. Michael is worse, I admitted with bitterness. At least Richard has the decency to pretend he cares. Michael does not even pretend. He lives in Houston. He has his own consulting firm and only calls me when he needs me to guarantee a loan or invest in his projects. The last time I saw him was 8 months ago at Christmas. He arrived with his wife and my grandkids, ate, opened gifts, and left the next day. Ernest left the pen on the desk and stared at me. What do you want to do, Arthur? That question floated in the air. What do you want to do? As if I had the power to change anything. As if after years of being the compliant dad, the generous father-in-law, the weak grandfather, I could wake up one day and recover the respect I had lost. I want it to hurt, I said finally. I want them to understand that I am not a stupid old man, that every dollar they have bears my name, and that I can take it all away if I feel like it." Ernest smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a shark that has just smelled blood in the water. "Then we are going to need a plan, and it is going to require you to be relentless, Arthur. Are you ready for that?" I nodded. For the first time in years, I felt like I was recovering some control, some dignity. We spent the next 3 hours designing a strategy. Ernest reviewed all the documents, the deeds to the properties that were in my children's names, the trusts I had created for my grandkids, the joint bank accounts. Everything was legally armored, he explained, but there were vulnerable points, clauses that I had signed without reading, trusting that my children would act with honor. How naive I was. "The first thing we are going to do is freeze all joint accounts," said Ernest while typing on his computer. I need your authorization to notify the bank. Starting tomorrow, no transaction can be made without your physical signature. No codes by message. No automatic transfers." "Do it," I replied without hesitation. "The second thing is more delicate. The properties you put in Richard and Michael's names. Technically, they belong to them, but there is something interesting in the contracts. Here it says that the definitive transfer was conditioned on certain requirements being met. Do you remember what they were?" I tried to remember. I had signed those papers 5 years ago at a time when my health was deteriorating, and everyone thought I would not make it to 70. The notary had mentioned something about reciprocal maintenance obligations or something like that. "I think it had to do with them taking care of me if I needed it," I said, "but we never put it into practice." "Exactly, and there is our legal ammunition. If we can prove that they have not fulfilled that obligation, we can start a reversal process. It will not be fast or simple, but it is possible. How much time? 6 months, maybe a year. Too much time. I needed something immediate. Something that would hurt them now, not in a year. What if there is another way to pressure them?" I asked. "Something more effective." Ernest studied me with curiosity. "What do you have in mind?" I explained what I had thought about during the drive to his office. A risky idea, perhaps immoral, but effective. Ernest stayed silent for a few seconds, processing the information. Then he let out a dry laugh. "Arthur, you are tougher than I thought, but it can work, although we will have to be very careful. If this goes wrong, you could face legal consequences. At my age, earnest legal consequences worry me less than dying being the father of my children." That afternoon, I left the office with a folder full of documents and a clear plan. When I returned home, it was already night. Richard was in the living room watching television. Emily was not there. Probably she had gone out shopping, spending the money that I had not yet authorized. "How did it go, Dad?" he asked without taking his eyes off the screen. "Fine, son. Everything is in order." I went straight to my room. I locked the door, something I never did, and took out the folder Ernest had given me. Inside were copies of all bank movements from the last 2 years, transfers to Richard and Michael's accounts, credit card payments, investments in businesses that never existed, a constant bleeding of my assets. But the most interesting thing was on the last page, a copy of the text message Emily had sent to Richard that morning. Ernest had managed to obtain it through a contact at the phone company. It was not entirely legal, but I did not care either. There it was, printed on paper. "The old man's account is asking for the code." That phrase would be my weapon. The next morning I woke up early, earlier than usual. I made coffee and sat at the dining table with the folder in front of me. Richard came down at 8 still in his pajamas with his hair messy. "Good morning, Dad," he said, yawning. "Did you have breakfast already?" "Yes, but I need to talk to you." "Sit down." Something in my tone made him obey immediately. He sat in front of me with an expression of slight concern. "Is something wrong?" I opened the folder and took out the paper with the text message. I placed it on the table in front of him. I saw how his eyes widened slowly, how his face turned pale. "What? What is this?" he stuttered. "This?" I said with a calm that surprised even myself. "It is proof that you and your wife see me as a stupid old man." The old man's account. How cute, right? Richard tried to say something, but I raised my hand to stop him. I do not want excuses. I do not want explanations. I want you to know that starting today, things are going to change. All joint accounts are frozen. All credit cards that I pay are canceled. And this house, which technically is still mine, even though you use it as if it were yours, has new rules. Dad, I have not finished, I interrupted him. Tomorrow, first thing in the morning, you are going to go with your wife to the bank, and you are going to sign the return of all the transfers I have made to you in the last 6 months. If you do not do it, I am going to start a legal process to recover the house and the properties I put in your name. But that is impossible. Those properties are mine. Read the fine print, son. There are clauses you never fulfilled, and I have the best lawyers in Chicago ready to prove it. The silence that followed was dense, uncomfortable. Richard looked at me as if I were a stranger, and maybe I was. Maybe the real Arthur, the man who built an empire from scratch, had been asleep for too long. "Why are you doing this?" he asked finally with a broken voice. "Because I no longer want to be the old man they make fun of," I replied. "Because I deserve respect. And if I do not get it with love, I am going to get it with fear." I got up from the table and went up to my room. Behind me I heard Richard hitting the table with frustration. I did not care. For the first time in years, I felt like I was being myself again. That night, Emily returned home. I heard her arguing with Richard in a low voice. Then there was a slammed door. Then silence. I did not go down to dinner. I was not hungry. I only had one certainty. The war had begun, and I was ready to win it. The following days were of unbearable tension. Emily barely spoke a word to me. When we crossed paths in the hallways of the house, she looked away as if I were invisible. Richard tried to maintain an appearance of normality, but it was evident he was furious. I saw it in the way he clenched his jaw when I entered a room, and how he avoided making eye contact with me. But I did not yield. Not an inch. On Tuesday morning, just as I had ordered, the two went to the bank. They returned 3 hours later with long faces and that air of defeat that produced a satisfaction I did not expect to feel. Ernest had kept me informed by message. They had signed the return documents. Not all the money, of course. That would have been impossible, but a significant amount that would make them understand that their days of living at my expense were over. That same afternoon, I received a call from Michael, my younger son. I had not spoken to him for weeks, so I knew immediately that Richard had told him everything. "Dad, what is going on?" His voice sounded between annoyed and confused. "Richard tells me you're freezing accounts and threatening to take away properties. Is it true?" "Completely true," I replied bluntly. "Why? What did we do wrong?" That question seemed so absurd to me that I almost let out a bitter laugh. "What did you do wrong?" "Michael, the last time we spoke was because you needed me to guarantee a loan of $100,000 for your company. Before that, it was because you wanted me to invest in I do not know what consulting project. It is always the same. You only call when you need money." "That is not fair, Dad. I have my life, my family, my business. I cannot be calling you every week just to chat. I am not asking you to call me every week. I am asking for a minimum of respect, that you see me as your father and not as a walking bank." There was an uncomfortable silence on the other end of the line. "So what do you want? For me to go to Chicago to beg for forgiveness on my knees?" "I do not want you to ask for forgiveness. I want you to understand that things are going to change, and if you do not like it, that is your problem, not mine." I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking a little, not from fear, but from adrenaline. All my life I had been the mediator, the one who avoided conflicts, the one who preferred to yield rather than fight. But that version of me was dead. In his place, someone harder, colder had been born, someone who no longer had anything to lose. During dinner that night, the tension at the table was so dense it could be cut with a knife. Emily prepared roast chicken, one of my favorite dishes, But I knew it was not a gesture of peace. It was a strategy. She was trying to soften me up, make me believe that everything could go back to normal. "It is delicious," I said with forced politeness. "Thank you, Mr. Arthur," she replied with a fake smile that did not reach her eyes. Richard ate in silence without looking up from his plate. Suddenly Emily put her fork on the table with a sharp thud. "Mr. Arthur, I need to talk to you," she said with a voice that tried to sound firm but betrayed nervousness. "I'm listening. It is not fair what you are doing. Richard and I have worked hard to maintain this house, to take care of you, and now you treat us as if we were thieves." "Worked hard," I repeated with genuine curiosity. "At what exactly?" "Because I pay for this house. I pay the utilities. The food you are eating I paid for. So tell me, Emily, what have you worked so hard at?" She turned pale. Richard finally looked up. "Dad, do not talk to my wife like that." "Then tell your wife not to talk to me as if I were the villain of this story," I replied coldly. "Do you want to know what is unfair? Unfair is that you call me the old man by text message. Unfair is that you use my money as if it were yours. Unfair is that you treat me like a nuisance in my own house." Emily got up from the table with her eyes full of tears, but I knew they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of rage, of impotence. She went up the stairs quickly and closed her bedroom door with a slam that made the walls vibrate. Richard looked at me with a mixture of resentment and pain. "You are destroying this family, Dad." "No, my son. This family was already destroyed. I'm just stopping the pretense that everything is fine." I got up from the table and left the plate half finished. I was not hungry. I went up to my room and locked myself in. From the window I could see the lights of Chicago shining in the distance. This city had given me everything: fortune, recognition, opportunities, but it had not given me the only thing that really mattered: a family that valued me. That night I could not sleep. The hours passed slowly while my mind reviewed every decision that had led me to this point. Had I been too soft? Too generous? Had I spoiled my children by giving them everything without asking for anything in return? Maybe. But it was too late for regrets. Only the path forward remained, and that path required me to be relentless. At 3 a.m, I heard noises downstairs, careful steps, the sound of drawers opening. I got up in silence and went down the stairs barefoot. The kitchen light was on. There was Richard looking through the desk where I kept important documents, looking for something in particular. I asked from the entrance. Richard jumped, slamming the drawer shut. Oh yes, I could not sleep. "I was just looking for a glass of water. The water is in the kitchen. That desk is in the living room. Do you want to try again?" He stayed silent, trapped in his own lie. "I was looking for the property documents," he admitted finally. "I want to know exactly what you can take from me and what not. And you thought I would have them here in an unlocked drawer." I shook my head with disappointment. "Richard, you offend me. All important documents are in the safe at Ernest's office, and if you try anything, if you try to forge a signature or make any legal move without my consent, I am going to sue you for fraud. Do you understand?" His face hardened. "Who are you?" "Because you are not the Dad I knew. You are right, I am not. That Dad died the day I read how your wife referred to me. Now only an old man remains who is tired of being taken for an idiot." Richard walked past me and went up the stairs. I heard him enter his room and the murmur of an argument with Emily. I did not care. I went back to my room, locked the door, and this time I managed to sleep. A deep sleep, without remorse. The following days passed in a cold war. Emily and Richard spoke in whispers, made calls in the garden where I could not hear them. They were planning something I knew, but I was also several steps ahead. On Thursday I received another call from Michael. This time his tone was different, less hostile, more cautious. "Dad, I talked to Richard. He told me everything that is happening. I think we should see each other and talk things over as a family." "Now you want to talk as a family? How convenient. Please, Dad, can we resolve this? It does not have to be a war." Something in his voice made me doubt. Maybe there was a small possibility that he really wanted to fix things, or maybe it was just another strategy to manipulate me. Either way, I decided to give him a chance. All right, come this weekend, but come alone. Without your wife, without intermediaries, just you and me. Agreed. I will arrive Saturday morning. Saturday dawned cloudy with that gray weather Chicago has sometimes in October. Michael arrived promptly at 10 in the morning. He came in his white pickup truck, the one I had helped him buy 3 years ago with a loan he never paid me back, but I decided not to mention it. Not yet. I received him in the study, a room that had been my refuge for decades. Walls lined with books, a mahogany desk, leather armchairs. Michael sat across from me, uncomfortable, as if he were in a school principal's office. "Thanks for coming," I said, offering him coffee, which he rejected with a gesture. "Dad, this is getting out of control. Richard is desperate. Emily is talking about going to live with her parents. You cannot go on like this." "Go on like what?" "Demanding respect. Defending what is mine. It is not that. It is the way you are doing it. You are being cruel." That word hit me harder than I expected. Cruel. I who had given them everything. I who had sacrificed my own comfort so they would have a better life. I was the cruel one. "Do you know what is cruel, Michael?" My voice came out harder than I intended. "Cruel is that your own children see you as a bank account. Cruel is that they call you the old man, as if you were an object. Cruel is realizing at 72 that your family only tolerates you because you have money." Michael looked down. For a moment I thought he was going to say something significant, a genuine apology, an acknowledgement. But what he said was worse. "Maybe if you had not used money to control us, things would be different." I froze. "Control you? Is that how you see things? That I controlled you with money? Is it not true? It was always the same. Do this and I help you with that. Marry this person and I buy you a house. Work in my company and I give you a percentage. Everything had a price, Dad. Everything had conditions. I gave you opportunities. I opened doors for you. And this is how you thank me. Saying, I controlled you. No, Dad, you bought us. And now that you want to collect the bill, you are surprised that we are upset." Those words were left floating in the air like poison. Michael got up from the armchair. "I came here thinking we could fix things, but I see you have already made your decision. You are going to be left alone, Dad, completely alone, and when that happens, do not come looking for me." He left the study without saying goodbye. I heard his truck engine starting, the sound of tires on the gravel driveway, and then I stayed there sitting in my leather armchair surrounded by books and memories, feeling how something inside me was breaking into pieces. Was he right? Had I bought them? No. I refused to accept it. I had given them love. I had given them time. I had taught them values. It was not my fault they had decided to value only money. That afternoon, Ernest called me. "Arthur, we need to talk. There is something you should know." "What happened?" "Richard went to see another lawyer, one specializing in family law. He is asking about the possibility of declaring you mentally incapacitated to take control of your assets." I felt as if I had been punched in the stomach. "What did you say?" "You heard me. They are looking for a way to declare you incompetent. Senile dementia, lack of judgment, whatever works. If they manage to convince a judge, they can take control of everything. That is impossible. I am perfectly lucid. I know. But they are going to try anyway. They are going to look for compliant doctors, neighbor testimonies, anything that helps them. You need to be prepared." I hung up the phone with my hands shaking. It was not fear. It was pure fury. My own children were willing to destroy me, to humiliate me publicly just to keep my money. They wanted war. Then they would have war. That is the reason I did not stay in jail. I did not stay in jail. I did not stay in jail. There was a website called The Old Man Problem, where my 2 sons and their wives discussed strategies to strip me of control of my assets. I took pictures of everything with my own cell phone, evidence, ammunition. The next day, Sunday, I went down to breakfast as if nothing had happened. Richard was reading the newspaper. Emily was preparing eggs and ham in the kitchen. "Good morning," I greeted with a smile. Both returned the greeting cautiously. I poured myself coffee and sat in my usual place at the table. I ate calmly, savoring every bite, while they watched me sideways, wondering what I was plotting. When I finished, I wiped my mouth with the napkin and left my cell phone on the table with the screen showing one of the screenshots of messages from the group, The Old Man Problem. "Emily," I said with a calm voice. The food was delicious. "Richard, could you explain to me what this is?" I pointed to the screen. I saw the color drain from his face. Emily peeked out from the kitchen and let out a small stifled scream. "Dad, I can explain. I do not need explanations. I understood everything already. You want to declare me crazy to keep my money. How cute. What a well-thought-out plan. It is not what it seems. Is it not?" I took out my cell phone and began to read aloud. "We need to act fast before the old man gives it all away to some foundation. The lawyer says with 2 psychiatric evaluations we could get guardianship. Michael, you have to come to Chicago and support me with this." Richard tried to grab my cell phone, but I pulled it away. "This is a copy. I already sent everything to Ernest and also to my contacts at the newspaper. If you try to declare me incompetent, I'm going to make public every conversation, every plan, every betrayal. You understand what that means. It means all of Chicago society is going to know what kind of children I have. Dad, please. You have 24 hours to leave this house," I said, standing up. "You can take your clothes and personal items. Everything else stays. The Audi, the jewelry, the electronics I bought, everything." "You cannot do that," shouted Emily. "This is our house." "No, this is my house, and I do not want you here anymore." I went up to my room with firm steps, ignoring Emily's screams, the fake crying, Richard's pleas. I locked myself in and called Ernest. "Could you send security personnel? I'm going to need them to supervise my unwanted tenants, leaving without taking anything that does not belong to them." "Of course. I am sending 2 people in an hour." Exactly 1 hour later, the doorbell rang. 2 burly men in discreet suits introduced themselves as security staff from Ernest's firm. Richard saw them with disbelief. "Seriously, Dad. Security guards. Have you fallen so low? I have not fallen. I have risen. There is a difference. I watched them pack for 3 hours. Emily cried while putting clothes in suitcases. Richard made desperate calls, probably to Michael, probably to his friends looking for somewhere to stay. The security guards checked every bag to make sure they did not take anything valuable I had bought. When they finally walked out the door with their suitcases and boxes, neither said goodbye. Richard shot me one last look full of hate. Emily did not even turn to look at me. The Audi stayed in the garage. They left in an Uber, and I stayed alone in a 5-bedroom house, surrounded by silence and ghosts. Did I feel victorious? No. Did I feel regretful? Neither. I just felt empty. But then my cell phone rang. It was a message from Michael. "Dad, this is not going to stay like this. You are going to pay for what you did to Richard and Emily. And when you are truly alone, when you have no one, you are going to understand what you lost. Hopefully your pride is worth it." I read the message twice. Then I deleted it and blocked his number. Let them try whatever they wanted. I was ready. That night while eating dinner, alone at the dining table looking at the empty chairs that a family once occupied, I made a decision. I was not going to sit with my arms crossed, waiting for their next move. It was time to play my final card. I called Ernest. "I need you to prepare something, a legal document, a lawsuit, and I need it to be forceful. Against whom? Against my 2 sons, for fraud, misappropriation, and conspiracy. I have the proof. I have the messages. I have everything we need." Ernest stayed silent for a few seconds. "Arthur, are you sure? A lawsuit against your own children. That is going to be public. It is going to be dirty. Things are going to come out that maybe you do not want known. Let it all come out. I have nothing to hide anymore. But they do. All right, give me 3 days and you will have your lawsuit. I hung up and poured myself a whiskey. The first in months. I drank it slowly, savoring the burn in my throat. In my mind, I was already visualizing what the trial would be like. My children's faces when they realized they were not fighting against a weak old man, but against an adversary who knew every corner of the legal system, who had resources, who had determination, but above all, who no longer had anything to lose. The 3 days Ernest asked for turned into a week of absolute silence. None of my children tried to contact me. No calls, no messages, nothing. It was as if I had ceased to exist for them. Or maybe they were waiting, planning their next move from the shadows. I did not stay still either. I hired a private investigator, a serious, discreet guy recommended by Ernest. His name was Hector Malone. He was 50-something and had the calculating look of someone who has seen the worst of people. I paid him generously to investigate every financial move of Richard and Michael in the last 5 years. I want to know everything. I told him in our first meeting in a discreet coffee shop downtown. Every investment, every loan, every shady deal. If there is something illegal, I want proof. Hector nodded while taking notes in a small notebook. Do you have any specific suspicion? I have many. But let us start with the obvious. Michael has a consulting firm, North Strategies, that according to him is very successful. But I have never seen concrete financial reports. Richard says he manages real estate investments, but he has no properties in his name other than the ones I gave him. Something does not add up. Understood. I will have results for you in 2 weeks. Meanwhile, the lawsuit was taking shape. Ernest summoned me to his office to review the preliminary documents. The folder was thick, full of legal terms I barely understood. But the essence was clear. I was accusing my children of continued fraud, misappropriation of funds through emotional manipulation, and conspiracy to commit fraud by attempting to declare me incompetent. It is solid, said Ernest, adjusting his glasses while reviewing every page. But Arthur, you have to understand something. Once we file this, there is no turning back. Your children are going to counterattack with everything. They are going to say you are a vengeful father, that you are senile, that you invented all this. It is going to be brutal. Let them say it. I no longer care what they think of me. And your grandkids. Have you thought about them? That question hit me. My grandkids. Sarah, Michael's daughter, 14 years old. Richard's twins, Paul and Andrew, 11. I had not seen them for months. Probably their parents had already put in their heads that I was the villain of the story. My grandkids will grow up and they will understand, I said, although I was not sure I believed it. They will understand that sometimes you have to take difficult decisions to defend your dignity. All right, then we proceed. We will file the lawsuit on Friday. That night, returning home, I felt strangely calm, as if I had crossed an invisible line and there was no turning back. The house remained just as empty, just as silent. I had thought about hiring someone to help me with cleaning and food, but something in me resisted. I did not want strangers in my space, not yet. I made a simple ham and cheese sandwich, poured myself another whiskey, and sat on the terrace to watch the sunset. Chicago stretched out before me with its lights beginning to turn on one by one. This city had seen me triumph. It had also seen me build a family, and now it saw me destroy it. Was I the villain of this story? Maybe. Or maybe I was just an old man who had woken up too late. On Wednesday, I received the first call from Hector. Mr. Arthur, I have preliminary information that will interest you. Can we meet? Come to my house. You have the address. He arrived an hour later with his worn leather briefcase. I received him in the study and locked the door. Hector took out a tablet and began to show me documents. Let us start with Michael. His consulting firm, North Strategies, is officially registered, but its reported income is ridiculously low. I am talking about less than $5,000 annually. That is not enough to even pay a secretary. Then how does he live? I asked, although I already knew the answer. With your money, Mr. Arthur. I have tracked the transfers you have made to him in the last 3 years. They total more than $250,000. But here's the interesting part. Michael has been using that money to invest in a completely different business. What kind of business? Hector slid his finger on the screen and showed me photographs of a nightclub in Houston. Neon lights, modern facade. Flashy name Eclipse Lounge. He is co-owner of this place, along with 2 other partners. A bar that, according to my sources, has certain problems with legality. They have been fined 3 times for selling alcohol to minors, and there are rumors that other merchandise moves in there, if you understand what I mean. I felt the blood rush to my head. Is my son involved in drug trafficking? I cannot confirm it without more investigation, but the signs are there. Customers known to the police, cash movements without justification, closure of several similar establishments in the area. If he is not directly involved, he is at least an accomplice by omission. And Richard. Richard is more subtle. I found that he has been registering properties in the name of shell companies. 3 apartments in the Gold Coast, which officially belong to a company called RD Real Estate, whose only shareholder is a certain Rose Daniela Sandoval. Emily, I murmured. His wife? Exactly. Those properties are easily worth $400,000. And according to records, they were acquired through loans that you guaranteed, but that were never used for what were supposedly investments in housing development. They robbed me, I said with a calm I did not feel. They used my signature, my money, my trust to steal millions. That is correct, and I have the documents to prove it. Contracts, deeds, bank transfers, everything. I asked Hector to send me everything by encrypted email. I also asked him to keep investigating, to dig deeper, to leave no stone unturned. I gave him an advance of $10,000 in cash. He left with the promise of having a complete report in a week. When he left, I sat in the study for hours. It was not just betrayal. It was systematic robbery, planned, executed with coldness. My own children had seen me as an exploitable resource, a bottomless pit they could draw from, and I had allowed it. But now I had the weapons to destroy them. On Friday, just as Ernest had promised, the lawsuit was filed in civil court. A 120-page lawsuit that detailed every crime, every deception, every manipulation. I put a name and surname to their betrayals, and I asked not only for the return of the money, but also penalties for fraud. Ernest called me at 3 p.m. It is done. They were notified an hour ago, both Richard and Michael. How did they react? Richard tried to scream, but the process server is professional. He explained he had 30 days to respond, or it would proceed by default. Michael hung up the phone when they tried to notify him, so they had to leave the subpoena at his home. Good. Now the good part starts. I was not wrong. That same night, my cell phone began to ring. Calls from unknown numbers, anonymous text messages, some aggressive. Damned old man, you're going to pay for this? Others pleading, Dad, please, we can fix this without lawyers. Some clearly written by Emily with her dramatic style. How can you do this to your own blood? I blocked all numbers. Every single one. But there was one message I did read completely. It was from an email account I did not recognize. Protected email. The subject said, Grandpa, please read this. I opened it with caution. It was from Sarah, my granddaughter. Grandpa Arthur, it is me, Sarah. Dad does not know I am writing to you. He is very angry with you and says horrible things. Mom, too. But I just want to know why you do not talk to us anymore. Did we do something bad? The twins ask about you all the time. Paul says you do not love him anymore. Please, Grandpa, tell me what happened. I miss you very much. I read that message 3 times. Each time I felt a stab in the chest. My grandkids. The innocent ones in all this. They were not to blame for having ambitious and disloyal parents. I wrote a careful response. Dear Sarah, you and your cousins did nothing wrong. I love you very much, and I will always love you. But sometimes adults have problems that are difficult to explain. It is not your fault, nor Paul's, nor Andrew's. When you are older, you will understand. Meanwhile, take care of yourself. Your grandfather, who adores you. I sent the message and closed the laptop. I could not afford to soften. Not now. Not when I was so close to winning. The following days were a whirlwind of legal activity. Ernest kept me informed of every development. Richard had hired a lawyer named Armand Vance, known for being aggressive and unethical. Michael, surprisingly, had not yet officially responded to the lawsuit. That is a bad sign, Ernest told me during one of our meetings. When someone does not respond, either they are looking for a way to negotiate in secret, or they are preparing something big. Like what? Like a countersuit. Or worse, like a media campaign to destroy your reputation before the case goes to trial. Let them try. But Ernest was right. A week later, the local paper published an opinion piece titled "The Loneliness of Success: When Money Destroys Families." It did not mention names directly, but it was obvious who it was talking about. A successful Chicago businessman who had sued his own children in an act of senile revenge. The article painted a portrait of a bitter old man obsessed with control, unable to accept that his children wanted independence. I read it completely with a mixture of fury and disbelief. It was a skillfully written piece, ambiguous enough not to be libelous, but clear in its intention to destroy my public image. I called Ernest immediately. I need you to find out who paid for that article. I already did. It was published by a freelance journalist who has connections with Richard's lawyer. It was definitely a paid piece. Can we sue? We can try, but it would be hard to prove defamation. They do not name you directly. It is more effective to counterattack with our own narrative. What do you propose? There is an investigative journalist who owes me a favor. His name is Rick Oliver. He is honest, incorruptible, and loves uncovering these types of cases. If we give him access to the documents, he could write something that puts things in perspective. Do it. Give him everything we have. 2 weeks later, the most important newspaper in Chicago published a 3-page report, "The Dark Side of Family Success: When Children See Their Parents as ATMs." Rick Oliver had done his homework. He interviewed anonymous sources, reviewed public records, and although he did not use our names for legal reasons, the article made it very clear there was a pattern of financial abuse by adult children toward elderly parents. The response was immediate. Online comments were divided. Some defended me. Good for that gentleman. Kids nowadays just want everything handed to them. Others attack me. How sad that he uses his money as a weapon. Money does not buy love. But the most important thing is that the article changed the narrative. It was no longer just the bitter old man against his innocent children. Now there was a public debate about family responsibility, economic abuse, and the limits of parental generosity. Richard responded with another article, this time on a popular blog, an emotional text where he presented himself as the victim of a controlling father who used money to manipulate. He described a childhood of impossible demands of conditional affection, of love, measured in dollars and cents. It was a lie, or at least it was a distorted version of reality. Yes, I had been demanding. Yes, I had used financial incentives to motivate them, but I had never denied them my love. I had never closed the doors of my house or my heart to them. Until now. The media battle continued for weeks. Articles against articles, radio interviews. All of Chicago seemed to have an opinion on my case. Some known businessmen called me to express their solidarity. Others avoided me at social events, as if my family situation were contagious. But I remained firm in my decision. In the middle of all this, Hector handed me his final report. 3 folders full of documented evidence. Richard's shell properties, Michael's shady businesses, unexplained transfers, unpaid loans, everything meticulously organized with dates, amounts, and supporting documents. "This is enough to sink them," said Hector. With this evidence, you will not only win the civil lawsuit, you could file criminal charges for fraud. How long would they be in prison? Depending on the judge and how the case is presented, it could be between 3 and 7 years each. I felt a chill run through me. My children in prison. The idea was at the same time satisfying and terrifying. Did I really want to go that far? Think about it well, Hector advised me. One thing is winning a civil lawsuit and recovering your money. Another very different thing is sending them to jail. That has no turning back. I know, I replied, but they did not think about the consequences either when they decided to betray me. That night alone in my house, I reviewed all the material. Each document was a stab wound. Each bank transfer was a confirmation that my children had seen me as a useful idiot. I poured myself a double whiskey and stared at the photographs of Michael's bar, a pretentious name for a dirty business. Then I made a decision. The next day I called Ernest and gave him clear instructions. I want you to file criminal charges against both of them for fraud, misappropriation, and whatever else we can add. I want them to feel the full weight of the law. Ernest stayed silent for a few seconds. Arthur, once we do this, your children are going to face very serious consequences. Are you absolutely sure? Completely sure? They decided to play dirty. I am just responding with the same rules. All right, I will prepare the documents. But first, I need you to come sign personally, and I need you to be aware that this is going to explode in the media. It is going to be ugly. Let it explode. I no longer care. The following Monday, I signed the documents at Ernest's office. My hand trembled slightly as I put my signature on every page, but it was not from doubt. It was from the adrenaline of knowing I was about to launch the final grenade. Criminal charges were filed Tuesday morning. By noon, there were patrol cars at Richard's house. They arrested him in front of his neighbors handcuffed, while Emily screamed hysterically that this was abuse and injustice. Michael was arrested in Houston that same afternoon at his bar in front of employees and customers. The images were captured by someone with a cell phone and uploaded to social media. In the video, Michael could be seen struggling slightly with the police, shouting that this was revenge from his father, that he was innocent. I watched those videos from the tranquility of my study. I did not feel joy. I did not feel sadness. I only felt justice. That night, the scandal was a trending topic on Twitter Chicago. Children against father, justice or revenge, money and family. Everyone had an opinion. Journalists requested interviews. Radio programs wanted my version. I rejected all invitations. I did not need to explain myself to anyone. The facts spoke for themselves. Richard and Michael spent 2 days in different holding cells. Then they were released on bail. A bail that, ironically, they probably had to pay with money that was originally mine. Their lawyers requested a preliminary hearing, which was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In those 3 weeks, something strange began to happen. I started receiving messages from people I did not know. Other parents who had gone through similar situations. Some thanked me for making visible a problem no one talked about. Others shared their own stories of ungrateful children, of families broken by greed. A lady in her 60s wrote me a particularly moving email. Mr. Arthur, we do not know each other, but I want to thank you. My son stole my life savings, and I never had the courage to report him. Seeing that you did gives me hope. I wish more parents had your courage. I read that message several times. Courage. Was that what I was showing? I did not feel brave. I felt tired, hurt, betrayed. But I also felt I was doing the right thing. The preliminary hearing was a media circus. Television cameras at the courthouse doors. Journalists shouting questions. Richard and Michael arrived with their lawyers, dressed impeccably with serious expressions they had rehearsed. I arrived with Ernest walking slowly, but with my head held high. Inside the courtroom, we sat on opposite sides. It was the first time I saw my children face to face since everything had exploded. Richard looked at me with pure hate. Michael simply looked away. The judge, a 50-year-old man with a reputation for being strict but fair, reviewed the documents for what seemed like an eternity. Then he spoke. This case presents sufficient elements to proceed to trial. Trial date is set for 90 days from now. Meanwhile, the accused remain under restriction not to contact the victim, nor dispose of assets being litigated. Session adjourned. 90 days. 3 months for everything to be defined. 3 months in which I would have to live, knowing I had sent my own children to a criminal trial. I left the courthouse under the harassment of cameras. I made no statements. I got in the Mercedes with Ernest, and we left. "How do you feel?" he asked while driving. "Like someone who has just crossed the river without the possibility of returning," I replied. "You can still withdraw the charges. You can still negotiate a deal." "No, this ends in trial, and I am going to win." The following days were strangely quiet. No calls from my children, no threatening messages, just silence. A silence that was more terrifying than any confrontation. But I knew it was the calm before the final storm, and I was ready to face it. The 90 days felt like 90 years. Every morning I woke up in that huge empty house, wondering if I had done the right thing. Not regret, but an existential doubt that ate me up inside. Was it justice I sought, or simple revenge disguised as dignity? Ernest visited me 2 or 3 times a week to review the trial strategy. We had gathered a mountain of evidence, bank transfers, signed contracts, text messages, testimonies from bank employees, property records. It was a solid case, almost unbreakable. Richard's lawyer is going to try to paint you as an abusive father. Ernest warned me during one of those meetings. They are going to say you used money as a tool of control, that you conditioned your affection on financial obedience. Prepare for them to air dirty laundry. There is no dirty laundry to air. I was a demanding father, yes, but never abusive. They are going to twist every memory, every time you told them no, every time you punished them. They are going to use everything against you. Let them do it. The truth is on my side. But the truth I discovered soon was something very malleable in the hands of skilled lawyers. One afternoon in October, while reviewing old mail in the study, I found a shoebox full of old photographs. Photos of when Richard and Michael were kids. Birthdays, beach vacations, picnics. In all the images I appeared smiling, with my small children in my arms, unaware that those same children one day would see me as an enemy. There was a particular photo that broke my heart. Richard must have been about 7 years old in his first soccer uniform. I was squatting next to him with my arm over his shoulders, both smiling at the camera. Behind the photo, in my own handwriting, I had written, "Richard's first game, won 3-1. I am so proud of him." When had everything broken? At what moment had that 7-year-old boy who saw me as a hero become the 40-year-old man who called me the old man with contempt? I could not pinpoint an exact moment. It had been gradual, like the erosion of a stone by water, imperceptible day by day, devastating over time. I put the photo back in the box and closed the lid. I could not afford nostalgia. Not now. 2 weeks before the trial, I received an unexpected visit. It was 9 at night when the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw a young woman I did not recognize immediately. I opened the door cautiously. "Mr. Arthur," she asked timidly. "I am Valerie, Michael's wife. I had seen her maybe 3 times in the last few years. Michael always found excuses not to bring her to family gatherings. Now she was in front of me with red eyes from crying. "What are you doing here?" I asked without inviting her in. "I need to talk to you. Please, just 5 minutes." Something in her desperation made me yield. I let her in and guided her to the living room. She sat on the edge of the sofa, nervous, twisting a handkerchief in her hands. "Mr. Arthur Michael does not know I am here. If he finds out, he is going to go crazy. But I had to tell you something." "I am listening." "My husband Michael, he is not a bad person. It is just that he got carried away by ambition, by wanting to prove to you that he could be successful on his own. But he made wrong decisions. That bar, those investments, Everything got out of hand. And why are you telling me this? What do you expect me to do? That you withdraw the charges, she said with a broken voice. Please, if he goes to trial, if they convict him, he is going to go to jail. And I am pregnant, Mr. Arthur. 3 months. Our first baby. Your grandchild. Do you really want your grandchild to be born with his father in prison? Those words fell on me like a bucket of ice water. Another grandchild. A new life coming into the world in the middle of this disaster. Does Michael know you are pregnant? Yes. I told him 2 weeks ago. But he is so consumed by the trial, by the hatred towards you, that he has barely reacted. He only talks about winning, about destroying you in court, about proving he is the victim. Valerie, I did not start this war. It was them. It was your husbands who decided to see me as an exploitable resource. I know. And you are right to be angry, but think about your grandchild, Mr. Arthur. About Sarah, about the twins, about this baby coming. Is it worth destroying the whole family for money? It is not for money, I replied firmly. It is for respect. It is for dignity. It is because I am not going to allow them to treat me like trash for what remains of my life. Valerie began to cry openly. I got up and offered her a glass of water, which she rejected. Please, she pleaded between sobs, talk to Michael. Find a way to fix this. You do not have to forgive him alone. Stop this before we all lose. It is too late for fixes. The trial is in 2 weeks. It is never too late. You are his father. If you take the first step, he what? Is he going to thank me? Is he going to ask for forgiveness? No, Valerie. He is going to see my forgiveness as weakness, and he is going to continue using that weakness against me. She stayed silent, defeated. Then she got up slowly from the sofa. I understand. I just ask you one thing. When that baby is born, when your grandchild comes into the world, remember this conversation. Remember that you had the opportunity to choose peace, and you chose war. She left without saying goodbye. I stayed in the living room with the glass of water still in my hand, feeling something twisting inside my chest. Was I a monster? Had I become what I had always fought against? No, I refused to accept it. Valerie was using the pregnancy as an emotional weapon. It was pure manipulation. If I yielded now, I would never have peace. I would never have respect. That night, I did not sleep. Tossed and turned in bed for hours, reliving the conversation, imagining that baby being born, imagining Michael in prison, missing the first years of his son. But I also imagined the alternative. Forgiving, withdrawing the charges, and going back to being old Arthur the ATM, the dumb grandpa who signs checks without asking. No, 1,000 times. No. The next morning I called Ernest. Is there any way to speed up the trial? Why would you want that? Because every day that passes is one more day of doubt. I want to end this once and for all. The trial is in 2 weeks, Arthur. That is already fast for legal standards. Have patience, but patience was never my strong suit. 1 week before the trial, Richard's lawyer made an unexpected move. He filed a request for a change of venue, arguing that the case had been so publicized in Chicago that it was impossible to find an impartial jury. The judge denied the request. The trial would continue in Chicago. Then they tried another tactic. They requested a psychiatric report for me, arguing that a person in his right mind would not sue his own children. They wanted to prove I was experiencing some kind of senile dementia that made me act irrationally. Ernest exploded when he told me, "It is ridiculous. It is offensive. But we have to respond. I am going to request that they also submit to psychiatric evaluation. If they are going to play dirty, we play dirtier." The judge ordered both parties to submit to evaluation. I went with a forensic psychiatrist who spent 3 hours asking me questions, memory tests, logic exercises. In the end, his diagnosis was clear. The patient shows all mental faculties intact, with full capacity to make decisions and understand the consequences of his acts. Richard and Michael's reports were equally favorable for them. In the end, all they achieved was delaying the inevitable trial one more week. Finally, the day arrived, Monday, November 18th. The sky was gray, threatening rain. I dressed in my best suit, navy blue red tie. I looked in the mirror and saw a 72-year-old man who seemed to have aged 10 more in the last few months. But I also saw determination in those tired eyes. Ernest picked me up at 7 in the morning. The trial would start at 9. "Ready?" he asked me. I have been ready for months. We arrived at the courthouse, and there was already a crowd outside. Journalists, television cameras, onlookers. Some shouted messages of support, others insulted me. "Bad father, vengeful, hope you rot in hell." I walked with my head high, ignoring all the noise. Inside the courtroom was full. I recognized some known businessmen friends from decades ago who had come to support me. I also saw my son's wives sitting behind them. Emily shot me a look full of poison. Valerie simply looked at the floor. Richard and Michael entered minutes later, both dressed impeccably with serious expressions. Neither looked directly at me. The judge entered and we all stood up. It was the same judge from the preliminary hearing, the 50-year-old man, with a reputation for being just but relentless. "Good morning. We will proceed with case number 8847, 2024. The State versus Richard Mendoza and Michael Mendoza, accused of fraud and misappropriation. Prosecution may begin." The prosecutor, a young but prepared man Ernest had recommended, stood up and began to present the case. He spoke for 45 minutes, detailing every suspicious transfer, every forged document, every documented lie. Then it was my turn to testify. I sat on the stand under oath. The prosecutor asked me simple questions at first. Name, age, occupation. Then he went deeper. "Mr. Arthur, could you describe your relationship with your children before 2023? "It was good, or so I thought. I gave them everything they needed. Education in the best schools. Business opportunities, constant financial support. I thought I was being a good father. When did you start suspecting something was not right?" "About a year ago, I started noticing requests for money were more and more frequent. There was always an emergency, an urgent investment, an unexpected expense, and there was never reciprocity. Never a genuine thank you, Dad. Only more requests. And what led you to take legal action?" "A text message. My daughter-in-law, Emily, wrote to my son, Richard. The old man's account is asking for the code." That is what they called me. The old man, as if I were an object, not a person. There were murmurs in the room. The judge asked for silence. How did you feel reading that? As if my heart had been ripped out, because I realized my family saw me only as money. Not as a father, not as a grandfather, only as a means to finance their lives. Richard's lawyer, Armand Vance, stood up for cross-examination. He was a burly man of about 50, with a deep voice and intimidating attitude. "Mr. Arthur, is it true that you always conditioned your affection on your children's performance?" No. Let me refresh your memory. Here I have an email you sent to Richard in 2018. "Read it, please." He handed me a printed copy. I read aloud. "Richard, if you want me to keep supporting your real estate project, I need to see concrete results. I cannot keep investing in ideas that do not generate return." "Is that not conditioning support on performance?" asked Vance with an accusatory tone. "It is asking an adult for responsibility," I replied. "It is not the same. And how many times did you use money as a pressure tool?" I never saw it that way. I invested in their projects hoping they would be responsible. That is not pressure. It is common sense. "Mr. Arthur, is it true that when Michael decided to move to Houston, against your will, you cut off financial support for 6 months?" I stayed quiet for a few seconds. "It was true, but there was context. I was angry because he left without consulting, but eventually I continued supporting him. Eventually, after punishing him with silence and absence of money. Is that not emotional manipulation?" "Objection," intervened Ernest. "The lawyer is twisting the facts." "Overruled," said the judge. "You may continue." Vance smiled with satisfaction. One last question. Mr. Arthur, how much of this is really about justice, and how much is about an old man who is afraid of losing control? Objection, shouted Ernest. Sustained. Rephrase the question, counselor. I have no more questions, said Vance, returning to his seat. I got off the stand, feeling like I had been dragged through mud. The lawyer had been skilled. He had taken fragments of truth and turned them into a narrative of control and manipulation. The trial continued for 3 days. Witnesses paraded bank employees who confirmed the transfers, private investigator Hector Malone, who presented his evidence, accountants who demonstrated financial discrepancies. Also, friends of the family testified, speaking about how they had seen me change in recent years, how I had become more withdrawn, more bitter. Then came the turn of Richard and Michael. Richard went up to the stand first, wearing an impeccable gray suit, and having rehearsed his role of wounded son well. My father has always been a difficult man, he declared with a controlled voice. We grew up knowing his love came with conditions that if we did not meet his expectations, we were rejected. That leaves scars. And the money he lent you? Asked his lawyer. They were not loans, they were gifts. We never signed any document saying we had to pay it back. He gave us money freely, and now because he is angry, he wants to say we stole it. That is not fair. Why do you think your father's doing this? Because he is alone. Because my mother died 5 years ago and he never processed that grief. And because he needs to blame someone for his loneliness, he chose to blame us. That mention of my deceased wife hit me like a punch. It was true I had never completely processed her death. Helen had been my anchor, my balance. Without her, I had lost myself, but that did not justify my children's betrayal. Michael was more aggressive in his testimony. My father hates me because I was never the son he wanted, he said bitterly. He always preferred Richard. He always compared me to him. And when I finally managed to be successful on my own with my bar, he could not stand it. He had to destroy me. Did your father know where the money for that bar came from? I told him it was an investment in consulting. Technically, I did not lie. The bar is a nightlife entertainment consultation. There was laughter in the room. The judge silenced them with the gavel. Ernest's cross-examination was brutal. Mr. Mendoza, is it true your bar has been fined 3 times for selling alcohol to minors? Michael turned pale. That was irresponsible employee's fault, and the accusations of illicit substance trafficking on the premises are just rumors. Nothing has ever been proven. But there are ongoing investigations, correct? I am not obliged to answer that. Answer the question. Yes, there are investigations. Ernest let that answer float in the air before continuing. One last thing. Mr. Mendoza, is it true your wife is pregnant? What does that have to do with the case? Answer, please. Yes, she is pregnant. And do you not find it ironic that you, who are about to be a father, treated your own father like an ATM? Objection, shouted Vance. Irrelevant. I withdraw the question, said Ernest with a smile. I have no more questions. The closing arguments were the next day. Vance painted a portrait of me as a family tyrant, a man who used money as a whip. The prosecutor, on the other hand, presented irrefutable evidence of fraud, forged documents, unauthorized transfers, documented lies. When he finished, the judge announced he would give his verdict in a week. 1 more week of waiting. 1 more week of insomnia. But finally, verdict day arrived. The room was even more crowded than before. Everyone wanted to see how this family saga ended. The judge entered. We all stood up. My hands were shaking. Ernest put a hand on my shoulder in a gesture of support. I have carefully reviewed all evidence presented, began the judge with a grave voice. This is a complex case involving not only legal aspects, but also deeply damaged family dynamics. However, my duty is to apply the law, not family therapy. He paused. The silence was deafening. In the case against Richard Mendoza, I find the defendant guilty of misappropriation in the amount of $150,000. Sentence. 4 years in prison and full restitution of the amount plus interest. Emily screamed. Richard closed his eyes, defeated. In the case against Michael Mendoza, I find the defendant guilty of fraud and operating a business with funds of deceptive origin. Sentence: 5 years in prison and full restitution, plus a fine of $50,000. Valerie began to sob. Michael stood up violently. This is unfair. You are destroying families. Order in the court, bellowed the judge. The defendants may appeal the sentence within a period of 30 days. Session adjourned. The gavel fell with a blow that sounded like a gunshot. I had won. But as I watched my sons being escorted out of the room, handcuffed with their wives crying behind them, I did not feel victory. I only felt an immense void. Ernest hugged me. We did it, Arthur. We won. Yes, I replied with a hollow voice. We won. That night, back in my empty house, I poured myself the last whiskey from the bottle. I looked out the window at the lights of Chicago, the city that had given me everything except the only thing that really mattered, a family that loved me unconditionally. My phone vibrated, a message from an unknown number. I opened it cautiously. It was from Sarah, my granddaughter, a single line. Grandpa, I hope you're happy. You took our dads away. I read that message over and over again. Then I deleted my answer 3 times before finally writing. Someday you will understand. I am sorry. But I knew she would never understand. How could she? She was just a child. I fell asleep on the sofa that night with the phone in my hand and the empty glass on the table. And I dreamed of that 7-year-old boy in a soccer uniform smiling at me from an old photograph. A boy who no longer existed. A son I had lost forever. 6 months after the trial, I received a letter. It came from the state prison with Richard's handwriting. It did not say much, just 3 lines. Dad, you were right about many things, but you were also wrong about many others. I wish we could have talked before we got to this. Your son who still loves you, even if you do not know how to see it. I kept that letter in my desk drawer next to the photograph of the 7-year-old boy. I did not reply. Maybe someday I would, or maybe some abysses are too deep to cross. Now I live alone in this big house. I hired a lady who comes 3 times a week to clean and cook. On Sundays I go to the club to play dominoes with other old men like me, some with similar stories, others with intact families who visit every weekend. They ask me how I am. I answer fine. It is a lie, of course, but it is a necessary lie because the truth is too complicated, too painful. The truth is I won the battle but lost the war. I recovered my money but lost my children. I defended my dignity but was left without family. Was it worth it? Some days I say yes, that it was necessary, that I could not keep being the stupid old man who signs checks. Other days I wonder if it would have been better to swallow it all, keep being the ATM. At least that way I would have someone to call me at Christmas, but there is no turning back. The decisions are taken, the sentences are served, and I am still here in this huge house, surrounded by silence and memories. A 73-year-old man who learned a terrible lesson. Sometimes winning means losing everything, and the respect earned with fear never feels like respect. It feels like loneliness. Final message. If you reach this point, thank you for listening to the story of this stubborn old man. I do not know if I did the right thing. I will probably never know. I only know there came a moment when I had to choose between my dignity and my family. I chose dignity. Now I live with the consequences. Each of you will have to make your own choices when the time comes. When you feel you're being used, that you're being despised, that they see you only as a resource. I just tell you one thing. Think well before crossing that river, because on the other side there is no turning back. And loneliness is a very high price for respect, although sometimes it is the only price we have left to pay. May God bless you all, and may you never have to face the decision I faced.